My parents left me a dilapidated old house in a remote corner of Montana, while my younger brother Spencer inherited their well-kept home in Lincoln, Nebraska. My wife, Ellen, called me a weakling, lacking the guts to stand up to Spencer, and she kicked me out of the house, saying I could only return when I'd fought for what was fair. I drove to Montana, my heart full of hurt and curiosity, never expecting that this house would change my entire life. Hello, my name is Brooks Anderson, 42 years old. I work as a banker at a small branch in Lincoln, Nebraska. My life, if I had to describe it, is like a quiet river. Calm, predictable, but never truly vibrant. I'm not the kind of person who likes talking about himself, but since you're here, I'll try to help you understand who I am and why I'm standing in front of this crumbling house, holding a set of rusty keys, my heart swirling with mixed emotions. I grew up in Lincoln, in a middle-class neighborhood with identical houses, white walls, red-tiled roofs, and neatly trimmed lawns. My parents, William and Mary Anderson, were simple people. My father was an auto mechanic and my mother was an elementary school teacher. They loved us, Spencer and me, but it wasn't a loud kind of love. They taught us to be kind, to yield, and to always put family first. But there was always something missing, a piece I couldn't quite name. My parents rarely spoke about our family's roots. I only knew bits and pieces gleaned from half-told stories that my great-grandfather was part of the Lakota tribe, a Native American people who once lived on the vast prairies of the Great Plains. My grandfather Joseph was the last in our family to hold some connection to that culture, but he passed away when I was too young to remember. My father, perhaps wanting us to blend into city life, never spoke much about my grandfather or our Lakota heritage. What little I knew came from vague stories, that my great-grandfather was a skilled hunter, that my grandfather worked on a ranch near the Bighorn Mountains, and that our family left their ancestral lands to start anew in Nebraska. I don't blame my parents. They just wanted us to have an easier life, free from the label of different in a city where Native Americans were often met with wary glances. But sometimes when I looked in the mirror and saw my dark brown eyes and thick black hair, I wondered, who am I really? Deep down, a part of me yearned to connect with those roots, but I didn't know where to start. Spencer, my younger brother, was different. 4 years my junior, he was always the center of attention. Tall, handsome, with a smile that easily won people over. Spencer was ambitious, sharp, and unafraid to do whatever it took to get what he wanted. When we were kids, he always got the bigger slice of cake, the nicer toy, and our parents' attention. I wasn't jealous, or at least I told myself I wasn't. I was the older brother, and older brothers are supposed to give way. But sometimes, I wondered if I was too weak, as Ellen often said. Ellen, just mentioning her name makes my heart tighten. We met 15 years ago at a mutual friend's party. She was the daughter of a well-off family from Omaha, a smart, decisive woman with sharp green eyes and perfectly styled blonde hair. Ellen was drawn to my gentleness, or so she said. You're different from other men, she told me. You're honest, dependable. I fell for her at first sight, loving how she made everything around her come alive. We married after 2 years of dating, and her parents gifted us a small house in the Lincoln suburbs, a gift I was grateful for, but one that always made me feel indebted. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was stable. Ellen worked in real estate, always busy with contracts and meetings. I, on the other hand, was content with my desk job. I liked the calm of numbers, of balancing ledgers. But Ellen wanted more. She wanted me to climb the ladder, to become the strong man she envisioned. Brooks, you can't keep letting people walk over you, she'd say, her voice laced with disappointment. You let Spencer push you around, you let your colleagues overtake you. Are you going to live your whole life as a nobody? I didn't know how to respond. I didn't want to compete, didn't want to become a version of Spencer. But each of Ellen's words cut like a knife, making me doubt myself. Was I really weak? Had I let life pass me by without fighting for anything? Everything changed one March afternoon when I got a call from the hospital. My parents had died in a car accident on the highway. A truck had lost control and crashed into their car. I don't remember how I drove to the hospital, only that when I arrived I collapsed in the cold hallway, tears streaming uncontrollably. Spencer arrived after me, outwardly calm, but I saw his hands tremble as he signed the paperwork. The funeral was heavy with grief. Spencer and I barely spoke, exchanging only brief words about arrangements and visitors. Ellen stayed by my side, holding my hand, but I sensed a distance in her eyes. Maybe she was disappointed that I wasn't showing the strength she expected. Maybe she thought I should do or say something to prove I was the older brother. A week later, my parents' lawyer called us in to read their will. I didn't expect much. My parents weren't wealthy, and I assumed their assets would be split evenly. But when the lawyer read the will, it felt like the ground fell out from under me. Mary and William Anderson leave their house in Lincoln, Nebraska, along with all personal assets, to their younger son, Spencer Anderson, the lawyer said in a steady voice. To Brooks Anderson, they leave a property in Stillwater County, Montana, along with all its contents. I was stunned. The Lincoln house was where Spencer and I grew up, filled with memories of our parents. It was well-maintained, comfortable, worth $1 million in today's market. The Montana house? I didn't even know it existed. My parents had never mentioned it, and I only vaguely recalled that my grandfather had lived somewhere in the mountains. Spencer looked at me, a cryptic smile tugging at his lips. Guess Mom and Dad knew you didn't like city life, he said, half joking, half serious. I didn't respond, just nodded, trying to hide the sense of injustice swelling inside me. Ellen, on the other hand, couldn't contain her anger. On the drive home, she exploded. You're okay with that, Brooks? A rundown shack in the middle of nowhere while Spencer gets the entire estate? You're the older brother and you let your little brother walk all over you like that? It was their wish, I said, my voice hoarse. I didn't want this, Ellen. Their wish? She let out a bitter laugh. Your parents clearly thought nothing of you, and you don't even bother to fight. You're weak, Brooks. You've always been weak. Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. I wanted to argue, to say I didn't need the house, that I just wanted to keep the peace with Spencer, but I couldn't say anything. Maybe deep down, I was afraid she was right. That night, Ellen kicked me out. She said she couldn't live with a man who didn't stand up for himself. Go, Brooks, she said, pointing to the door. Go to that worthless house of yours in Montana. Don't come back until you do something to prove you're a man. I didn't argue. I packed a few clothes, grabbed my car keys, and drove off into the night. I didn't know if I was running away or searching for something. But by morning, I was on the highway heading toward Montana, the rusty keys the lawyer had given me weighing heavily in my pocket. The Montana house, according to the paperwork, was in a small town called Coldwater, nestled among mountains and endless pine forests. I'd never been there, but as I drove along the winding roads, I felt something strange, like I was returning to a place I'd never left. Or maybe I was just so tired, so hurt, that my imagination was playing tricks on me. When I arrived, dusk was falling. The house loomed before me, a crooked silhouette in the fading light. It was smaller than I'd imagined, with peeling shingles, broken windows, and vines crawling up the walls. But instead of feeling disappointed, I felt curious. There was something about this house, a secret waiting to be uncovered. I stepped out of the car, clutching the keys tightly. A cold wind blew through, carrying the scent of earth and pine. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. This was my inheritance, I thought, and whatever it was, I was determined to uncover the truth. I stepped forward, each step crunching the gravel beneath my boots. The bundle of keys in my hand felt heavy, cold, as if they carried the weight of the past's secrets. The front door creaked as I inserted the key into the lock. I had to shove it with my shoulder to get it open, and a damp, musty smell of rotting wood and dust hit me. Inside, the fading light of dusk filtered through gaps in the roof, illuminating a cracked wooden floor. An old table sat abandoned in the middle of the room, next to a brick fireplace covered in ash and soot. There wasn't a single sign of life. No lights, no pictures, no trace of a family that once lived here. But instead of feeling disappointed, I felt a strange urge. This house was whispering to me, as if it knew I hadn't come just to look but to search. I set my backpack down and pulled out the flashlight I'd brought from Lincoln. Its pale yellow beam swept across the room, revealing hidden corners. The house wasn't large, just a living room, a small kitchen, and a hallway leading to a few other rooms. I walked through each one, my footsteps echoing like heartbeats in the stillness. The main bedroom was empty, save for a rusty bed frame and a dusty old blanket. Another room seemed to be a storage space with a few rotting wooden crates scattered about. But when I pushed open the last door in the hallway, my heart began to pound. This door was different. It was made of solid oak, adorned with intricate carvings, images of eagles and suns, flowing lines like a river. I'd never seen anything like it in Nebraska. My hands trembled as I tried the keys in the lock, but none of them fit. I tried every key in the bundle, but the door wouldn't budge. A mix of frustration and curiosity drove me to keep going. I swept the flashlight around the door and noticed a small gap at the bottom corner. A secret entrance, perhaps. I knelt down, touched the gap, and felt a loose wooden panel. With a little effort, I pried it open, revealing a dark, narrow space. I crawled through, my heart pounding as if it might burst. Inside was a small room, no bigger than a large closet. My flashlight illuminated dusty wooden shelves lined with objects I'd never seen before. There were pottery vases with intricate patterns, hides embroidered with vibrant threads, and an eagle feather headdress with pristine white plumes. In the corner stood an old wooden chest, carved with the image of a wolf howling under a moon. My breath quickened. These weren't ordinary objects. They held a deeper significance, as if they were pieces of a larger story. I opened the chest carefully, as if afraid to break something precious. Inside was a leather-bound book, thick and heavy, its pages yellowed with age. I gently opened the first page, and handwritten words appeared. To those who carry the blood of the Lakota, preserve and cherish. Below was my grandfather's signature, Joseph Anderson, and a date, August 15, 1947. A jolt ran through me. This was my family's legacy, not the crumbling house, but what it concealed. I sat on the floor, flipping through the book's pages. It wasn't just a diary, it was a chronicle of my family, of the Lakota people. My grandfather wrote about my great-grandfather, a warrior named Wakantanka, Great Spirit in Lakota. He described the days when the tribe lived on the plains, hunting buffalo and performing rituals under starry skies. He wrote of the losses when white settlers came, taking their land and forcing the tribe onto reservations. But above all, he wrote of resilience, how my great-grandfather hid these artifacts to protect them from theft, so that one day his descendants could reclaim and continue the story of their people. I didn't realize tears were streaming down my face until they dripped onto the pages. I had never felt so close to my grandfather, my great-grandfather, or my tribe as I did in that moment. All those years growing up in Lincoln, I had lived as a stranger to my own roots. But now, sitting in this dusty room, I felt like I was being called by name, not Brooks Anderson, the banker, but Brooks, descendant of Wakantanka, bearer of Lakota blood. I spent the entire night examining the artifacts. Each one told a story. The eagle feather headdress my grandfather wrote was used in rain-making ceremonies. The pottery vases held the ashes of fallen warriors, hidden to avoid destruction by the U.S. Army. A small drum covered in deer hide still produced a resonant sound when I tapped it lightly. I didn't know their monetary value, but I knew they were priceless. They were history, the soul of a people I had never truly understood. The next morning, I called an old friend, Tom, an archaeologist at the University of Montana. I briefly told him about my findings, and he agreed to come take a look. When Tom stepped into the room, his eyes lit up like a child discovering treasure. "Brooks, do you realize what you're sitting on?" he said, his voice trembling. "These artifacts, they could be worth millions of dollars. Not just materially, but for their historical significance. This is the legacy of the Lakota, the kind of thing museums around the world would pay a fortune to own. I was stunned. Millions of dollars? That kind of money could buy back the Lincoln House, pay off Ellen's debts, and let me live comfortably. But even as the thought crossed my mind, I felt a deep resistance. These artifacts weren't for sale. They didn't belong in a museum or a collector's hands. They belonged to me, no, to my family, to the Lakota people. Tom left after promising to contact a native culture expert for further appraisal. I stayed in the house, continuing to read my grandfather's book. With each page, I learned more about the struggles my family had faced. My grandfather wrote about how my father, William, chose to leave Montana for Nebraska, hoping his children would have an easier life. But he also wrote of his pain as he watched my father drift away from Lakota culture. William thought assimilation was the only way to survive, he wrote. But I know that if we forget our roots, we lose ourselves. Those words cut like a knife. I thought of my parents, how they avoided talking about my grandfather or the tribe. Perhaps they feared that mentioning the past would lead to discrimination for me and Spencer, but now I realized they were wrong. The past wasn't a burden, it was strength, identity. In the days that followed, I began fixing up the house. I swept the floors, patched holes in the roof, and cleaned the artifacts with the care one would give to precious gems. Each day, I felt closer to my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and the ancestors I'd never met but who now felt alive within me. I started having strange dreams of endless prairies, the sound of drums, a man with long braided hair standing on a hill, gazing at the horizon. One afternoon, as I was cleaning a pottery vase, there was a knock at the door. I startled, as Coldwater was a remote place and I hadn't seen anyone besides Tom since arriving. I opened the door to find an older man, his skin tanned, his silver hair tied in a braid. He wore a simple shirt, but his eyes were sharp, as if they could see through to my soul. "I'm Samuel Black Elk," he said, his voice deep and steady. "Tom sent me. You're Brooks, Joseph Anderson's grandson?" I nodded and invited him in. Samuel stepped into the secret room, and when he saw the artifacts, his eyes glimmered with an emotion I couldn't quite name. Pride mixed with pain. He touched the eagle feather headdress, his fingers trembling. "Do you know how important these are?" he asked. "They're not just objects. They're the spirits of your ancestors, of our tribe." Samuel told me about the history of the Lakota, about the wars, the ceremonies, and how their culture was suppressed but survived through people like my grandfather. He said my grandfather had been a keeper of culture, hiding these artifacts to prevent them from falling into the hands of those who would erase the tribe's memory. Joseph believed that one day, someone from his line would find them, Samuel said, and that someone is you. I felt a weight on my shoulders, but also a fire igniting in my heart. I wasn't just Brooks, the timid banker. I was a descendant of warriors, storytellers, people who lived and died to protect their culture. But not everything was easy. A week later, Spencer showed up. He pulled up in a shiny SUV, striding into the house with his familiar confident smile. "Brother Brooks, I hear you found treasure?" he said, his tone half joking but his eyes calculating. "Tom told a friend and word got to me. Those artifacts are worth a fortune." My blood boiled. "They're not for sale, Spencer," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "They're our family's legacy, our tribe's." Spencer laughed loudly. "Legacy? Come on, don't be naive. Sell them, split the money, and you could live like a king. I'm willing to trade the Lincoln House for this one if you want." His offer shook me. The Lincoln House, filled with memories of our parents, our childhood. Part of me wanted to agree to go back to Ellen, to my old life. But as I looked at my grandfather's book, at the eagle feather headdress, I knew I couldn't. "No, Spencer," I said, my voice firmer than ever. "They don't belong to us to sell. They belong to the tribe." Spencer shook his head, looking at me like I was crazy. "You'll regret this, Brooks," he said before leaving. "You always regret your weakness." Spencer left, leaving me with a gnawing sense of unease. His offer, trading the Lincoln house for this one along with the priceless artifacts, was like a pebble tossed into a still lake, rippling thoughts I'd tried to bury deep. I sat in the secret room, still clutching my grandfather's leather-bound book, my eyes fixed on the eagle feather headdress hanging on the shelf. The flashlight's beam caught the white feathers, making them shimmer like tiny stars. But my mind wasn't here anymore. It was drifting back to Lincoln, to Ellen, to the life I once thought was enough. I stood and stepped out onto the porch. The night in Coldwater was frigid, the air carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. The sky was ablaze with stars, so bright I could make out every constellation. I'd never seen a sky like this in Nebraska, where city lights always dulled everything. Here it was clear, real, as if I stood at the heart of the universe. I wondered if my grandfather had ever stood here, gazing at this sky, feeling what I felt now. Had he ever faced temptations like the ones I was grappling with? The next morning I got a call from Ellen. Her voice over the phone wasn't as icy as it had been the last time we spoke. It was soft, almost tender, like when we first fell in love. "Brooks," she said, "I heard from Spencer about the things you found. Did you really find treasure?" I gripped the phone tightly, my heart pounding. "It's not treasure, Ellen," I replied, my voice hoarse. "It's a legacy. It belongs to our family, to the Lakota tribe." Ellen was quiet for a moment, then gave a soft laugh. "You're always so romantic, Brooks. But I'm more practical. If those things are worth millions like Spencer says, you could sell them. We could pay off our debts, buy a new house, travel the world. Don't you want that life? A life where we don't have to worry anymore?" Her words were like a sweet melody, conjuring images I'd once dreamed of. A bigger house, beach vacations, recognition from colleagues and family. But at the same time, I felt a deep resistance. These artifacts weren't a winning lottery ticket. They were history, the soul of my ancestors. Selling them would mean betraying not just my grandfather, but myself. "Ellen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "you don't understand. These things aren't for sale. They mean more than money." She sighed, her tone turning sharp. "You're still the same, Brooks, always idealizing everything. You think those old relics will change anything? They won't pay bills, they won't bring happiness? You're living in a foolish dream, and I'm tired of waiting for you to wake up." I wanted to argue, to tell her I'd found happiness, not in money, but in connecting with my roots. But I stayed silent, maybe because I knew no matter what I said, Ellen wouldn't understand. She didn't see what I saw, didn't hear what I heard in the wind rustling through the pines. "I'm coming to Montana," she said before hanging up. "I want to talk face to face. You can't keep running away forever." I stared at the darkened phone screen, feeling a storm approaching. Ellen always had a way of shaking me, making me doubt myself. But this time I was determined not to let that happen. I returned to the secret room, sitting before the wooden chest. I opened my grandfather's book again, seeking comfort in its words. He wrote of a time when my great-grandfather, Wakantanka, was tempted by an English trader who promised gold and silver for the tribe's sacred items. He refused, even though the tribe was starving. "Money can buy food today," my grandfather wrote, "but only spiritual value sustains us through generations." Those words were like a flame, dispelling the darkness in my heart. I knew I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for those who fought to preserve this legacy. Ellen arrived a week later on a drizzly afternoon. She wore a beige coat, her blonde hair tied high, looking both elegant and distant. Stepping into the house, she wrinkled her nose at the peeling wooden floor and cracked walls. "You're really living like this, Brooks?" she asked, her voice full of skepticism. "This isn't your home. It's just a pile of ruins." I didn't respond, leading her to the secret room. When she saw the artifacts, her eyes lit up, not with reverence but with calculation. She touched a pottery vase, her fingers tracing the patterns as if appraising it. "These things, they're beautiful," she said. Are you sure they're worth a lot? If so, I know an auction house in New York. We could make a fortune. Ellen, I interrupted, my voice firm. They're not for sale. She turned, her smile fading. Are you serious? You're going to keep them here in this falling apart house to rot with you? Brooks, this is a chance to change our lives. Your life, maybe, I said, looking her in the eye. But not mine. I found my purpose. These artifacts aren't just objects. They're the history of my family, of the Lakota tribe. I feel a responsibility to protect them. Ellen shook her head, stepping closer and placing a hand on my shoulder. You've changed, Brooks, she said, her voice softer. I don't know you anymore, but I still want us to try again. Sell them and we can start over. I'll forgive everything. How you let Spencer walk over you, how you disappointed me. We could be happy. Her words were like a knife, but this time, they didn't sway me. I gently removed her hand, feeling a newfound strength within. Ellen, I don't need your forgiveness, I said. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just doing what's right. If you can't accept that, then maybe we don't belong together. She stared at me, her eyes glistening with tears, but I saw it wasn't love in them. It was defeat. You'll regret this, Brooks, she said, her voice trembling. You'll be alone, and you'll regret it. She turned and walked out, leaving me standing in the room with the artifacts like silent companions. I didn't regret it. For the first time in my life, I felt I'd stood firm against temptation, against pressure. I was no longer the weak Brooks, always yielding to keep the peace. I was Brooks, descendant of Wakantanka, who chose to protect his legacy. But the temptations didn't stop. A few days later, a stranger appeared at my door. He introduced himself as a representative of a private museum in Chicago, having heard about the artifacts through an anonymous source, likely Spencer. He offered to buy the entire collection for $3 million, promising to include my name on a list of honored donors. Mr. Anderson, this is a chance for these items to be known to the world, he said, his voice smooth as velvet. We'll display them with the respect they deserve. I looked at him, anger rising within me. Deserve? I asked, my voice cold. You think putting them behind glass in a museum is deserving? They belong to the Lakota tribe, to the people who lived and died to protect them. You can't buy their spirit. The man gave a faint smile and shrugged. I'm just making an offer, Mr. Anderson. If you change your mind, here's my card. He left, leaving me with a lingering unease. I knew there would be others, more offers, and I'd have to be stronger than ever. After the meeting with the man from Chicago, I knew I couldn't keep the artifacts locked away in this room forever. They needed to be protected, but not by hiding them, by letting them live through education, stories, and community. The idea of a cultural center began to take shape in my mind. Not a cold museum, but a vibrant place where the Lakota and others could learn, connect, and take pride in their heritage. I started by reaching out to Samuel Black Elk. He came to the house one early morning, bringing a thermos of herbal tea and a warm smile. I shared my idea, and he nodded, his eyes gleaming. You're on the right path, Brooks, he said. Joseph would be proud of you, but this isn't something you can do alone. You need the community. Samuel introduced me to others in the Lakota community in Stillwater County. I met Rose White Deer, a traditional weaver, and Thomas Redhawk, an elder who knew hundreds of ceremonial songs. They welcomed me not as an outsider, but as family returning from a long journey. I felt a connection I'd never experienced, not with Ellen, not with Spencer, but with people who shared my blood, my history. Rose and Thomas helped me plan the cultural center. We decided to restore the house, turning it into a space to display the artifacts, hold classes on the Lakota language, weaving, and traditional ceremonies. I used my savings to buy materials, and the community pitched in to help with repairs. In those days, the house came back to life. We replaced the roof, repainted the walls, and built an outdoor area for ceremonies. But not everyone supported the idea. One evening, while working with Rose, I learned that Spencer had contacted a real estate company, trying to sell the house without my consent. I was furious, but Samuel urged me to stay calm. "Your brother is blinded by greed," he said, "but you don't have to be like him. Focus on your mission." I hired a lawyer to stop Spencer, and eventually I secured full legal ownership of the house. It was a small victory, but it made me feel stronger than ever. I was no longer afraid to confront Spencer, Ellen, or anyone else who tried to take my legacy. One summer morning, the cultural center officially opened. We held a traditional ceremony with the sound of drums echoing and smoke from sacred tobacco rising to the sky. Samuel led the ritual, and I stood beside him wearing a shirt embroidered by Rose, my heart swelling with pride. Dozens of people from the Lakota community and other tribes attended, along with curious locals interested in native culture. I stood before the crowd, holding a microphone, and for the first time shared my story. I spoke of my journey from Lincoln to Coldwater, of finding the artifacts, and how they helped me understand who I am. "I used to think I was weak," I said, my voice trembling. "But now I know strength doesn't come from money or power. It comes from knowing where you belong and fighting to protect it." The crowd applauded, and I saw tears in Rose's eyes. After the ceremony, a young girl approached me holding a beaded necklace. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks," she said. "I never thought I could be proud of being Lakota, but today I am." Her words were a gift, affirming that I'd done the right thing. The cultural center wasn't just a place to preserve artifacts. It was a place to nurture pride, hope, and connection. I stood there amid the laughter and chatter, the scent of ceremonial smoke lingering in the air, and felt a peace I'd never known. But deep down, I knew my journey wasn't over. This house, these artifacts had helped me find my roots, but more importantly, they helped me find myself. I, Brooks Anderson, once called weak, once living a life of yielding, was now at a new crossroads. Not because I'd become someone else, but because I'd embraced who I truly am. A man of Lakota blood with a responsibility to protect my ancestors' legacy and a heart yearning for meaning. In the weeks following the center's opening, I was busier than ever. Each morning I woke early, brewed a strong cup of coffee, and got to work. Some days I worked with Rose White Deer, arranging artifacts for display, carefully noting their stories as told by Samuel Black Elk. Other days I sat with Thomas Redhawk, listening as he taught me ceremonial songs, his voice rising and falling like a bridge to our ancestors' plains. I was still clumsy, butchering Lakota pronunciations and making everyone laugh, but I wasn't embarrassed. Each small step, each new word, brought me closer to my roots. But I didn't always feel strong. Some nights, when the center was closed, I sat alone in the secret room staring at my grandfather's leather-bound book, wondering if I was truly capable of carrying this forward. The pressure didn't just come from outside, from Spencer, Ellen, or the offers to buy the artifacts, but from within. I feared failure. I feared I'd harm this legacy, that I wasn't worthy of my grandfather's or the Lakota community's trust. One evening, as I was cleaning the eagle feather headdress, Samuel walked in. He said nothing, just sat on the old wooden chair holding a stick of sacred tobacco. He lit it, the smoke curling through the air, and finally looked at me. "You're worried, aren't you?" he asked, his voice low like the wind through the forest. I sighed, setting the headdress down. "I don't know if I'm doing this right, sir," I said. "I want to protect these things, to make this center meaningful. But I'm scared. Scared I'm not capable. I didn't grow up Lakota. I'm just a banker from Lincoln who found his roots a few months ago." Samuel smiled, the smile of someone who'd seen too much to be shaken. "You think Wakantanka, your great-grandfather, was never afraid?" he asked. "He stood before an entire army knowing he couldn't win, yet fought for his tribe. Strength isn't the absence of fear, Brooks. Strength is doing what's right, even when you're trembling." His words were like a breeze clearing the fog in my heart. I realized this journey wasn't about becoming perfect, but about daring to move forward even when I didn't know the destination. Samuel handed me a small necklace woven from sweetgrass and beads. "Wear it," he said. "It'll remind you that you're not walking alone. Your ancestors are with you." I put on the necklace, feeling the coolness of the sweetgrass against my skin. From that night on, whenever I doubted myself, I touched the necklace and felt my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and Samuel standing behind me. My journey of self-discovery didn't just happen in the house or the cultural center. It unfolded in small moments, in the lessons the Lakota community taught me. One day, Rose invited me to her home, where she was teaching a group of children traditional weaving. I sat there, watching their tiny hands move across the looms, creating intricate patterns. Rose explained the meaning of each design, the zigzag for lightning, the circle for the sun, the source of all life. I listened, feeling like I too was learning from scratch like a child. "Mr. Brooks, you try weaving," a boy named Tommy called, his eyes sparkling with mischief. I laughed, shaking my head, but Rose pushed me into the chair. "Don't be shy," she said. "Everything starts with a first step." I clumsily handled the loom, tangling the threads and making the kids giggle. But when I finished a small, crooked piece of fabric, I felt a strange joy. Not because I'd done well, but because I dared to try. In that moment, I realized this was the strength I'd always lacked. Not the strength to compete or win, but the strength to learn, to grow, to not fear failure. But every journey has challenges. One morning, as I prepared for a Lakota language class, I received a letter from Spencer's lawyer. He was suing me, claiming co-ownership of the house, arguing that our parents' will was unclear. The letter hit like a punch, leaving me reeling. I'd thought my battle with Spencer was over, that he'd let go after I secured legal ownership. I was wrong. Spencer didn't just want money. He wanted to prove I wasn't worthy, that I'd always be the loser. I called Samuel and he came right away. We sat on the porch looking at the distant mountains and I told him everything. "I'm tired, sir," I said, my voice hoarse. "I just want to do what's right, but why is everything so hard? Spencer, Ellen, the people trying to buy the artifacts. It feels like the whole world is against me." Samuel was quiet for a moment, then pointed to the sky, where an eagle was circling. "See that eagle?" he asked. "It flies high, but not because there's no wind against it. It flies high because it knows how to use the wind to lift itself. Your challenges, Brooks, are that headwind. Don't let them knock you down. Use them to soar higher." His words gave me a new perspective. Spencer, Ellen, the difficulties, they weren't enemies but lessons. I decided to face Spencer, not with anger but with resolve. I hired a skilled lawyer and we prepared for the trial. In the meantime, I kept working at the center, refusing to let the lawsuit slow me down. Each day I felt stronger, not because I was about to win the case, but because I knew I was fighting for what was right. The trial took place in Billings, a few hours' drive from Coldwater. I walked into the courtroom facing Spencer for the first time since his visit to the house. He was still handsome, confident, but I saw an emptiness in his eyes, the emptiness of someone chasing only money. When called to testify, I told my story without holding back. I spoke of my journey to Montana, the artifacts, the cultural center, and why I couldn't let them fall into the hands of those who wouldn't honor them. "I'm not doing this for myself," I said, looking at the judge. "I'm doing this for my family, for the Lakota tribe, for those who fought to keep this legacy alive." Spencer, in contrast, spoke only of the house and artifacts' material value, insisting he deserved a share. But I saw the judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, unmoved by numbers. In the end, she ruled that the house and its contents belonged to me, citing the clarity of my parents' will and my demonstrated commitment to the legacy's cultural significance. As we left the courtroom, Spencer looked at me but said nothing. I wanted to tell him I wasn't keeping the house to spite him, that I still loved him as a brother. But I knew, at least for now, Spencer wasn't ready to listen. I just nodded and walked out, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. Back in Coldwater, I held a small ceremony to thank the community for their support. We lit a bonfire under the open sky, sang Lakota songs, and shared stories of our ancestors. I stood before everyone, no longer the timid man who'd arrived with a set of rusty keys. I was Brooks Anderson, a man who'd found inner strength, not through victory but through daring to live true to himself. I began writing a book, chronicling my story and my family's based on my grandfather's journal. I wanted future generations, children like Tommy, like the girl who gave me the beaded necklace, to know they carried a precious legacy. I also dove deeper into Lakota culture, participating in ceremonies and even trying traditional hunting, though I was still a novice who made Thomas Red Hawk laugh until he cried. My happiness now lay not in what I owned, but in what I could give. Each time a child learned a Lakota word, each time the drum sounded at a ceremony, I felt I was repaying my ancestors, not with money but with love and responsibility. One evening, standing on the porch, gazing at the star-filled sky, I felt like my grandfather was somewhere smiling. I touched the necklace Samuel gave me and whispered, "Thank you for believing in me." The wind blew through, carrying the scent of pine, and I knew that no matter how hard this journey was, I would never walk alone. I was no longer the weak Brooks, always yielding. I was Brooks, descendant of Wakantanka, who found purpose in protecting his ancestors' legacy. And in my heart, for the first time, I was truly proud of my Lakota heritage.